Look, there's a million chronographs out there, and all of them have these different color accents and little unique touches. And I think the 60s vibe has definitely settled to stay in a lot of watches and in a lot of aesthetics. If you look at the releases from Breitling, where they're going back to their top time and they're doing all these different colorful editions, you now see that at a more affordable price range as it moves down through a lot of the different micro brands. And here we're looking at the Baltic Scalograph Tour Auto 2025. And it is a cool watch. This is the sort of watch that you're gonna wear during the summer. And as you walk around, you just take a look at it and it has that sort of like joy that comes with warmer weather. It's been cold. It has been a long winter. I don't know about you guys, but here in Indiana, it has been rough. So I'm very excited to wear something like this. Now, this is a limited edition model. There are 400 that will be numbered and shipped out to obviously the first 400 buyers. And this is a collaboration with the Tour Auto, which is one of those events that's just dripping in vintage elegance. Classic cars, winding roads, through France. It's the kind of stuff that makes you just want to grab a pair of leather gloves and a linen shirt and learn how to drive one of those cars. Now, I have never driven a car that old, but one of these days, if I ever get to, I want to wear a watch similar to this. This gets a lot of that aesthetic embedded into the watch, from the classic colorway to these little accents that are on the subdials to the typeface that you find in that subdial, the 60, 20, 40. You have these different additions here in just font that make such a big difference. And this is what I love about Baltic. When they come out with a watch, what they focus on are the tiny, tiny details. They do specs well. That is always a given. They've been out long enough to know that when they come out with a watch, it's gonna have some decent specs behind it at a reasonable price range. Spec-wise, you've got a double-domed sapphire crystal here. You've got nice finishing, obviously stainless steel throughout. You've got screw-down pushers, nice knurling here on the crown so that because it's a manual movement, you get an easy operation. Inside here is the Sellita SW510M, which is going to be a manual version of Sellita's version of the Valjoux 7750. So a rugged movement inside with an oscillating pinion and cam actuation activation. So Baltic always does the specs well. But what they also do is really focus on that less is more function that I think is really important in overall design. If you look at their name, it's almost not noticeable in the fact that Baltic is there. The focus here should be on the color and the contrast between those colors, in addition to some of these polished surfaces. These indices here are these arcs with a lume dot that's just positioned slightly further away from it. And you almost have to look at this watch about 6 inches away from your eyes to notice some of these little details. The crosshatch light blue that's in the small subdial off to the left, which is your running seconds. And in the larger chronograph register on your right, the subdial is obviously much larger. They have minute trackers where each is marked first with a black, hatching, and then it has these little 5-minute registers. The first 5 minutes from 30 to 5 is this red, and then you've got this dark blue from 10 to 15, and this light blue here from 20 to 25. And they're not important things. The whole point of a watch is not to really serve a very specific function. Let's be honest. Most of us use these or wear these because they look cool and they give us a really nice feeling. And I think that is what you find with this watch. And then on the outside here, this bezel, you have a scalograph, which the concept behind this bezel is that it gives you a more reasonable interpretation of speed. You basically drive a mile, and then by looking at the register where you're at, you get an idea of how fast you're going. So you start the chronograph, drive a mile. Once you're at a full mile, you look at the register and see what speed you're at in terms of miles per hour. Now, if you look here, obviously the top here is 60, and then if you go past 60, you're 57 miles an hour, 54 miles an hour, and so on and so forth. You can work backwards from there to get up to 200. It's got all these multi-point registers so that as you get moving faster, for those increments between 110 and 70, you have an increment for each one indicator. So from 70 to 71 to 72 to 73, so on and so forth, up to 110. And then from 110 to 120, you drop to just 110 to 115 to 120 in terms of your markers and registration. A traditional chronograph that gives you a tachymeter on the outside, frankly, just isn't that useful. It looks cool just like this one does, but it's not that useful. This one's an aluminum bezel insert, so you're not going to get any sapphire in here, but it matches that vintage aesthetic. There's almost no lume. As I said, there's tiny lume dots above the 12 and next to each of the indices. But the concept here is this is a daytime summer watch. When you wear it out, you want the light reflecting on each of these indices. You want the light reflecting on the hands. You want each of these little register hands also that are slightly polished to have a little reflection as well. You know, the blue register in the running minutes and the blue running chronograph seconds still have a little reflection to them, but all the main hour components have a lot of reflection to them. And so I find this watch is most attractive canted, slightly off axis to where you can get some of that reflection coming back at you. Most of the shots I tried to take here in the studio are all supposed to reflect that and supposed to show that. Now, in terms of specs, it's a 39.5 millimeter width, 14.1 millimeter thickness, and a lug to lug that's about 47 millimeters, and it certainly wears like that. So it's a little on the tall side, but that is expected for any chronograph. Now, they did a manual wind chronograph on the back, and that's important because if they had done an automatic one, it would be even taller. The 7750 or its derivatives is not known for being the most thin movement in the world, so that's just par for the course. Now, wearability, it is balanced. It feels really nice on the wrist. It doesn't feel overly top heavy only because there's not a huge amount of weight to the watch. And especially on this bracelet's really thin. It doesn't feel overly heavy. It's got a nice taper here. It's polished side links, flat link bracelet. So it is very much harkening back to the 60s and 70s. It doesn't feel dated though. It looks like a modern watch, but very much inspired by the watches that came before it, or at least the designs that came before it in the 60s and 70s. Now, this chronograph definitely respects negative space. The outer edge here on the dial, you've got print markers that wrap around lume dots at each hour. The lume here is BGW9 Superluminova, so it glows blue in the dark and gives you just enough functionality to kind of be able to read it in low light conditions. But for the most part, this is a daytime watch. You're supposed to look at this in bright sunlight, see the reflection off these indices, and be wowed by that. Now, the pushers here have a nice actuation to them. It feels solid, nice start-stop, nice reset. They are screw down, so it gives you 100 meters of water resistance, which is a nice safety net on a chronograph. Obviously, there's downsides to that, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. Now, most of chronographs are typically 30 or 50 meters water resistance, so the extra added benefit is just nice to take the stress off. Again, 50's perfectly fine to wear in the rain. I wear my vintage Speedmaster in the rain every so often. I don't try and get it out there, but it's perfectly fine. 100 is overkill, but it certainly makes people feel a lot better. Inside here is the Sellita SW510 movement. It's a powerhouse, 63-hour power reserve. It's not in-house, but it's rock solid. 7750 or Valjoux 7750 base. So there's nothing really poetic you can write about this movement, but it certainly is functional. And that's really what you need, because the basic concept here is you want a good looking exterior and something you can rely on the interior, just like you'd find in a classic car. Something that runs, well, supposed to be reliable. There's a whole conversation we could have about that with classic cars, but a nice, beautiful exterior. This is also a chronometer certified watch, so it's got that nice little added spec bump there, especially for the money that you pay. Case back here is engraved with the Tour Auto logo, and they obviously have the numbered edition on the back. And I think that's smart. A sapphire case back see-through here is really not needed. The movement's not that attractive, so perfectly fair to blazon the back with what the racing collaboration here is with Tour Auto. Now, it is manual wind, so you do need to make sure you do that. There is no date, so functionality here is all about clean aesthetics. The size is comfortable, the wearability is great. It does also ship with this suede strap, which I think is the perfect color combination. Sometimes when you get a blue strap, there's so many different variations of how blue it could be, how light, how dark. They made a great choice on this color here. It's not black, it's blue. They've got this slightly lighter blue stitching on the side. This strap here will be on many of my watches to come, and it will probably live on this Baltic as well. Now, there are downsides to the watch. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Obviously, legibility isn't the best if you don't have any reflection. These indices do tend to blend in a little bit in lower light scenarios. If I tilt it off axis, it is a little harder to read what time it is because the indices themselves don't have any white paint or any lume or anything to really make them stand out. So you do need a lighted area to read this, I think, effectively. Again, you should, because it's a bright watch. This is a summertime watch, but that is something to note as a downside. Screw down pushers are not the best if you're looking for quick use, unless you just leave them unscrewed, which is what I do. I just leave them unscrewed. I think they look cooler too with that flange, all the way out. And if you want to tighten them down, you can, but that gives you that access again so that you don't have to unscrew it in order to activate it. That's just part of it. I do think this watch would look fantastic on a NATO or a rally strap or rubber. I just think this is the perfect sort of look. And the offset subdial size, I think, is a really nice aesthetic as well. As I said, this is the watch I'm going to be wearing here coming up this summer a lot. It does come with its negatives. It is a daytime watch. It isn't the most legible. You're going to notice what time of day it is, and that's about it. Your chronograph function, as I said, you definitely need to start it in advance. And the bracelet, being this flat link bracelet, does catch hairs. That's always the case with every flat link bracelet I've ever had. For whatever reason, they always end up grabbing hairs. So you just need to know that. I won't be wearing it that much on this bracelet. I'll be wearing it probably on either this suede strap or on like a rally strap, because I think it would look really cool with the contrast with how blue this dial is. But the flat link is a nice aesthetic. It just means that it's going to catch hairs every so often. So all in all, I think this is a very well built watch. No surprise. That's what you get with Baltic every single time. You've got a nice function to the watch, but what you really have here is a little bit of soul, a little bit of feeling, and a little bit of aesthetic here that, again, I certainly will be enjoying. I'll be wearing this summer. You can expect a lot of pictures to come on my Instagram of this watch, and probably a recap near the end of the year, assuming and hopefully this is still part of my collection. So what do you guys think about this Baltic Scalograph Tour Limited? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.